It is finally time, boys! I have been waiting for this day for months now. For those of you who don't know, the upcoming Blue Archive Global Update will see the release of the new event from Opera 0068 with Love, featuring my favorite group of students, Problem Solver 68, with the new units being Dress Aru and dun 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 dun, Dress Kayoko, baby! Sadly though, no Dress Mutsuki or Dress Haruka or even Dress Sayori, which is borderline a war crime due to how beautiful and adorable and breedable they look. And don't get me started on no suit Haruka and no suit Mutsuki. Anyways, regardless, I am excited, and here is a short review of my two wives, Dress Kayoko and Dress Aru. Let's start with the leader of our lovable ragtag group, Dress Aru. She looks absolutely elegant in that new dress, and out of all three designs, for me, her dress version is my favorite. Her beautiful crimson red dress combined with that red overcoat, her fancy necklace and earrings, that new expensive Gucci bag that fits into her dress design, and especially that exposed leg which makes her look even sexier. Girl, the only evil deed you're doing in that dress is looking like a baddie. She finally exudes the vibe of a competent boss, and I think a lot of people would be fooled into thinking she's a scary evil criminal boss of a highly dangerous mercenary group, for a while at least. Dress Aru is a permanent piercing support striker with heavy armor who is terrible in urban terrains, average in field, and excellent indoors. These are the equipment she uses, with the pin and necklace being the priority as her survivability is important since she is a support unit. Now, it's time to take a look at her skills. Her 3-cost EX skill increases one student's crit damage except herself for 30 seconds. And with her basic skill, which procs every 50 seconds, she recovers the health of the student with the lowest HP, again not including herself. Her enhanced skill increases her attack, and her sub-skill gives her attacks a fixed 30% chance to lower an enemy's crit res for 13 seconds, with a 5-second cooldown between activations. Her enhanced skill plus at UE40 gives her more attack, and her indoor combat power improves from S to SS at UE50. As you can tell from her kit, Dress Aru is sort of like the striker version of Ako, except she doesn't boost crit rate, but rather she specializes in increasing crit damage. And she does this extremely well with her EX skill. Firstly, at max level EX, she is able to increase one unit's crit damage by a whopping 83.4% for the cheap cost of 3, and this potent buff lasts for quite a while at 30 seconds. This has allowed Dress Aru to become one of the top crit damage hyper buffers in the game, and she is able to greatly improve your main DPS unit's damage output, letting them hit like a truck for a very low cost. But how does she compare to other crit damage buffers such as Ako and Nyuya Fuka? Well, firstly, while her crit damage buff values are higher than Ako's even at max level, again, Ako does have the added advantage of increasing your unit's crit rate as well. So, Dress Aru is often paired with units that have guaranteed crit like Mika, Sayori, and Dress Kayoko. On the other hand, in comparison to Nyuya Fuka, who has the ability to cut your unit's EX cost in half, which is amazing, however, her crit damage buff isn't as high, with her buff going as high as 32.1% at level 5 EX. And in my opinion, this is where Dress Aru can come in as a good replacement, as I personally feel she will be much more useful than Nyuya Fuka in specific situations. For example, in teams with DPS units that have low EX costs, or that have UE in it who can also reduce EX costs. However, that is not to say Dress Aru is superior to Nyuya Fuka. Generally, I personally feel Nyuya Fuka is still more useful since her cost reduction ability makes her an incredible must-have unit. It's just that you can use the Aru instead in several situations. In fact, you can also even use both of them together in some cases. Even though Dress Aru's and Nyuya Fuka's crit damage buffs do not stack on each other as they are from the same source, you can use Nyuya Fuka's EX to reduce your Hyper Carry's EX cost by half, then use Dress Aru's EX to replace Nyuya Fuka's crit damage buffs, so that the Hyper Carry receives a more powerful buff and deals more damage. I hope all that makes sense. Despite those, Nyuya Fuka and Akko are much more flexible as they are special students, which is why they are used more often than Dress Aru, though again, it does depend on the situation. Other than those, as a striker supporter, using her frees up a place in your special slot, allowing you to fill it with other roles that you might need, like another healer or a debuffer or etc. But as always, the downside with striker supporters is that they can die, and if they do, you lose access to their buffs. So, in Dress Aru's case, you might want to avoid bringing her against enemies with piercing attack, since they can deal 2 times damage to her heavy armor. Aside from that, her basic skill is okay, while being able to heal the unit with the lowest HP is always a welcome ability. Where have I seen that skill before? It has an extremely long activation time of 50 seconds. Plus her healing values aren't great, you probably shouldn't rely on it as your primary source of healing. Finally, her sub-skill is pretty decent as she has a chance of reducing the enemy's crit res, meaning they have a higher chance of receiving a crit from the student you buffed, thus taking more damage. In terms of usage, due to the fact that she is one of the best crit damage buffers in the game, Dress Aru is pretty flexible, seeing quite a lot of use in a whole bunch of content. Most notably though, her main use lies in raids and specific joint firing drills. Her role in these content is pretty simple: greatly boost your main DPS unit's crit damage with her EX, and if possible, use her alongside other hyper buffers like Himari and etc. to further massively elevate their damage output. In terms of raids, like I mentioned, you probably wouldn't want to use her against bosses with yellow attack on Insane and Torment, such as Kaiten, Bina and Shirokuro, since she takes more damage. Technically you still can. For example, there are those who do bring her into Bina, since her buffs can help take him down quicker. But you may need to babysit her to ensure she doesn't die, lest you lose access to her buff. Regardless, she is still utilized in plenty of other raids, regardless of armor type, especially on Insane and Torment difficulties. For instance, she is great for Cheesed Phase 2, where she is used to buff the main DPS student, Mika, to deal tons of damage during his vulnerable period. And as I previously said, Dress Aru is an amazing partner for Mika, since the latter has guaranteed crit. So Dress Aru can give a massive crit damage boost to Mika, allowing her to hit extremely hard, making them a good combination in this raid as well as any other yellow raid. She is also useful for Shirokuro despite their yellow attack, and this is proven by the SRKR Grand Assault in JP a couple weeks ago, where she saw a lot of use in the purple and yellow armored stages. Not only that, she can be brought into HOD Insane/Torment, Insane/Torment Ghost regardless of his armor type, and finally Perurodzilla, which in my opinion is the raid that she sees the most use in, as she is often brought into a lot of players' Insane/Torment teams. However, with the existence of B Hoshino, her pick rate in this raid has decreased, since the former is able to literally turn it into a Hong Shmi raid, with a lot of senseis being able to one-team the giant chicken even on Torment with the correct units. Nevertheless, Dress Aru is still a great choice for this raid, and she does see a bit of use in second teams, especially for those senseis who aren't able to clear this raid with one team on Insane or Torment, maybe because they're new / they don't have the proper units for the B Hoshino team. Not to mention, for us global players, before the arrival of B Hoshino, she is still a great unit for Perurodzilla, being used in a lot of players' first or second teams, especially on Insane and Torment difficulties. For example, to buff the Iroha Ibuki combo, though this will probably require quite a lot of molding since she doesn't boost crit rate. All in all, B Hoshino's existence doesn't completely nullify Dress Aru's use in Perurodzilla, as you can definitely still use her in this raid. Overall, Dress Aru is an extremely strong crit damage buffer, making her one of the best buffers in the game, and she is used in a lot of content. But should you get her? Honestly, it depends. In my humble opinion, while she is definitely worth pulling for, if you already have other crit damage buffers like Akko, New Fuka, or just Akko, like maybe 2 of them, or heck, even all 3, and you don't plan on doing stuff like Torment where you will potentially need more than one buffer, since you'll most likely be running multiple teams, but instead you're fine with just clearing Insane or below, then I personally feel you don't exactly need her right now, and you may skip and pray for a future spook. You may also skip her since New Fuka will be rerunning right after this event, who, in my opinion, is arguably more important as New Fuka is limited and Dress Aru is permanent. Plus, New Fuka is much more flexible, though again, you might want to evaluate who to go for, unless of course you have a lot of paroxysms, in which case you could probably go for both. On the other hand, if you don't have either one of the crit damage buffers that I mentioned, or perhaps you only have one of them, then you can pull for her as she will be a great addition to your roster. Even if you have all 3 of them, you can still pull for her if you want a backup crit damage buffer. Perhaps because you want to take on Torment raids, or maybe because of waifu reasons. Ultimately, it is honestly up to you and your circumstances. Personally, I'm still leaning more to the fact that you should probably pull for her unless you don't have New Fuka, but it is definitely up to you. I've saved the best for last, folks, as now we move on to my favorite student. It's the cool, calm, beautiful, slender, and smart department head of Problem Solver 68 who has donned a gorgeous dress. It's my absolutely #1 wife, Dress Kayoko! Woo! Let's fucking go! She's finally here. I never thought I would get a second Kayoko ult, but here we are, baby. Woo! Kayoko bros, rise up! We're finally getting Kayoko content. Oh man, I never expected Kayoko to get her second ult so early, and to be honest, when they first announced this event, I honestly thought Dress Mutsuki would be the second unit. But imagine my pleasant surprise when Nexon bamboozled us again by announcing Dress Kayoko. And fun fact, she is the 5th unit and 4th Gehenna student to have a playable 3rd version, which is kinda surprising, cause I thought it'd be someone more popular like Mika or Yuka, but hey, it's the year of the Gehenna, baby. From the off, I'd just like to say, I'm totally in love with her dress design, and I'd like to offer my sincere gratitude to whoever designed her, cause they cooked. They went in the kitchen and came out with a 5-course meal. Her dress, which is shorter than my will to live, really suits her. Not only does it make her look stylish and elegant, it also gives off this mature goth vibe, really reminding you that she is in fact an adult. Unlike her previous outfits, which only really accentuated her cuteness and coolness, her dress version has a different atmosphere to it. It also highlights her sexy appearance, showing off her long, sexy, luscious legs and her slender body, which is a glorious sight to behold. And it's making my dinner become very hard and insane. Other than that, her cardigan is an excellent complement to her dress, adding a cool, casual look to her design, whilst simultaneously displaying the air of a rich young lady. Similar to her New Year version, she has quite literally let her hair down as well. And as a hair connoisseur, I'm all for it, because it further complements her dignified look. One final detail I'd like to touch on about her design is that black string in that hole, and we actually know what it is, ladies and gentlemen, after someone managed to get hold of her chibi model, and turns out it's black string panties. And so, armed with that knowledge, I shall dive right in to explore it like Dora the Explorer. So, don't mind if I do, Kayoko-chan. Itadakimasu! Pero. Oh, Kayoko-chan, so tasty! Whoa! So delicious! You're so sexy in that dress and those undergarments. Whoa! You need to take responsibility for tormenting my Bina, so it's time for you to bear my child. Whoa! Before I move on, I'd like to take a minute or two to talk about her L2D. It is divine, it is exquisite, it is bewitching, it is sensational, it is, dare I say, peak. all of her L2Ds have been melancholic and aesthetic, and this one is no different. I absolutely adore how she looks pretty tired, resting on a random metal staircase in an evening sunset setting, as for some reason, it really spotlights her as a tired adult who just got done with a day's work, which is kinda what she is whenever she has to put up with the other members' antics, but still donning a sexy look. And to be honest, I find that exhausted look of hers to be quite hot. The cherry on top of the proverbial cake though is her voice, and the music playing alongside the L2D.
本当によかった。先生も気に入ってくれて。
It just makes it so much better cause it's so fitting, and my god, it really does make one believe that paradise does exist. Overall, all these fuse together and it makes for a fantastic and visually appealing L2D, and it has definitely risen up to one of my favorites. 5 stars across the board, it's a 10/10 for me. Swiftly moving on from my gushing, Dress Kayoko is a permanent yellow DPS striker with red armor who is excellent in urban terrains, average in field but bad indoors. For her equipment, she uses the standard DPS equipment set. Taking a look at her skills, she has a 5-cost EX, which deals damage to one enemy while ignoring a percentage of said enemy's defense, with this attack guaranteed to crit if she is in the infiltration state, and she exits this state after using her EX. Also, can we talk about her EX animation for a little bit? Holy hell, it is so cool! It's very James Bond-esque as she sneaks through the crowd, shooting out the CCTVs with a silencer, and that shot of her aiming her gun at us with those red glowing eyes is so freaking badass. Her basic skill increases her crit damage for 16 seconds every 25 seconds, and her enhanced skill further boosts her crit damage. And with her sub-skill, she gains the infiltration status at the start of battle. If she is attacked, this status is removed. However, if she isn't attacked for 10 seconds after losing this status, she can re-enter the infiltration state again, and while in this mode, her crit damage is increased. At UA40, she receives even more crit damage, and at UA50, her urban combat power improves from S to SS. There's not much to talk about Dress Kayoko, cause she's the best unit in the game, and you'll instantly win in any content with her. Alright, that's about it. Wrap it up, boys! All jokes aside, Dress Kayoko is a pretty strong yellow DPS student due to several reasons. Firstly, her EX skill. While it is slightly expensive at 5 costs, it can deal quite a lot of damage, cause for one, it has pretty good multipliers, reaching as high as 1219% at max level EX. Not only that, it has innate defense penetration, being able to ignore up to 64% of the enemy's defense at level 5 EX. This attack is also guaranteed to crit, removing the need to crit more, though the condition is that she must be in the infiltration status. Speaking of which, the infiltration mode, which is part of her sub-skill, plays a huge role in her kit, as it can greatly improve her damage output. However, it can also be her biggest weakness, since you need to get used to maintaining this status and learning her rhythm. Remember, there are 2 ways she can lose the infiltration status. 1. Activating her EX while she is already in the infiltration mode, and 2. She gets damaged even a little when she is in this state. Thus, you will need to keep her safe from any kind of damage, no matter how small, so she doesn't lose the infiltration status. And ideally, the only way you'd want her to actually lose it is through the first method, using her EX while she has it, as it will be automatically removed. Even when she doesn't have the infiltration status, you'd still want her to not get hit, as she will regain it within 10 seconds if she isn't attacked. And if she does take damage during those 10 seconds, the timer resets and you will have to start waiting again. Oh, and by the way, before you ask, no, shields do not help with this. Even with a shield, if the enemy attacks her, she exits the infiltration status. Thus, as you can see, she requires a bit of micromanaging and babysitting. But once you get used to it, and if you successfully pull off her EX while she is in the infiltration status, then she can hit like a fucking truck, mainly against heavy armored bosses with high defense. Lastly, Dress Kayoko has a lot of crit damage as a result of her many self-buffs. For one, her max level basic skill supplies her with a 25.8% crit damage buff, with the activation time being quite short at 25 seconds. Plus, her Enhance and Enhance Skill Plus further grant her even more crit damage. And finally, if she is in the Infiltration mode, she gains an additional 63.8% crit damage buff at level 10 sub-skill. Furthermore, you may also use units such as Dress Aru, Nuya Fuka, or Akko to provide her with even more crit damage buffs, as they stack with her own self-buffs cause they come from different sources, and not her EX. Thus, all in all, you'd preferably want to use her EX when she has the Infiltration status and after her basic skill procs, so that she has an 89.6% crit damage buff, not including her Enhanced Skill or Enhanced Skill Plus, when activating her EX, giving her a huge boost in damage and allowing her to delete certain enemies. In terms of usage, Dress Kayoko's best use lies against enemies that fit the following criteria: single target bosses in urban terrain with yellow armor and very high defense that do not have a lot of AoE skills, as these attacks have a higher chance of hitting Dress Kayoko. Unfortunately for her though, currently the only enemy/boss that ticks all these boxes is Bina, making Dress Kayoko one of the best Bina killers in the game so far. In this raid, she is able to deal tons of damage to him, especially once she is in Infiltration mode, as not only does she gain extra crit damage and her EX becoming a guaranteed crit, but she can also ignore up to 64% of his exorbitant defense, allowing her to absolutely demolish him, and she can help you earn a high score, specifically in the urban version, though she still holds up pretty well in the field version. With all that being said, it'd be interesting to see how she performs in Urban Bina Torment, as so far, even in JP, we haven't had the chance to try her out in this difficulty yet, cause the last Urban Bina we got since her release was Grand Assault, and at that time, Torment was special armor, so we only really got to see her in action in Insane and Below, where she performed exceedingly well in, with many players using her to speedrun the yellow armored stages as she absolutely destroyed him. There was the Field Bina Total Assault about a month ago in JP, and while she was still a solid choice in this terrain for Insane and Torment, a lot of players opted for, well, obviously Mika instead, as she is much stronger than Dress Kayoko for this terrain, as well as Swimsuit Kana, who has defense down capabilities and a vastly better mood. Again, that is not to say that Dress Kayoko cannot be used in Field Bina, as she certainly can, for example, using her in a second team for Torment, or if you want/need to use her if you have no other option. It's just that there are various other students who are more suited for Field Bina. Other than the giant snake, she sadly doesn't see much use in other raids, even after factoring in Grand Assaults, as there aren't a lot of raid bosses that fit the aforementioned criteria. For example, bosses like Yellow Armored Cheese and Gauze don't have a lot of defense, so her damage in these raids decreases by quite a bit. And while she could potentially be useful in Urban Yellow Armored Hyro, since he has quite high defense, he also does have a lot of AoE attacks, making it harder to maintain her Infiltration status as her chances of being hit is increased. She might also be useful for Yellow Armored Field Peroro when it returns, since he does have a massive amount of defense, and she could potentially be used to snipe the shiny Peroro, but testing is definitely required. Despite all that, you can technically still use her against enemies with low defense, as she can have pretty good damage output. However, you will need her to be in Infiltration status, as the extra crit damage and guaranteed crit plays a huge role in boosting her damage output. If you're able to maintain this status, then she can sort of act as your team's main DPS unit. Though I still wouldn't recommend it, cause you might as well just use other yellow DPS units who can deal more damage and don't require a lot of managing. Or you could also use her as a secondary DPS, where you'd worry less about managing her Infiltration status. Overall, Dress Kayoko is a good, strong yellow DPS unit whose entire kit revolves around maintaining her infiltration status. However, she has a very niche use for single target yellow armored bosses with extremely high defense. And at this moment in time, there is a lack of this type of content, with the exception of Bina. Thus, if you want to have an easier time and be able to earn a higher score in this particular raid, especially the urban version, then you may pull for her. Or perhaps if you want to prepare for a future high defense yellow armored raid, or if you're a fellow Kayoko bro like me, in which case, how incredibly based. With all that being said, personal bias aside, you may also skip Dress Kayoko due to how niche she currently is. Cause again, there presently aren't a lot of content that she truly excels in. Plus, there are already a whole bunch of single target yellow DPS students whom you can use to replace her, especially outside of Urban Bina as they perform much better. And even in Urban Bina, you can use other units such as Kazusa or Yuzu to get the job done. Not to mention, gameplay wise, there are many important upcoming units over the next few weeks/months, so if you want to save your pyroxenes for those units, you may skip her and use your other yellow DPS students instead. If it were up to me though, I'd release a mandate stating that everyone must pull for Dress Kayoko until UA 50, and the punishment for not doing so, death penalty. And that's all for this week's review. All in all, Dress Aru is an excellent crit damage buffer, while Dress Kayoko is a good yellow DPS unit. And it is entirely dependent on you to decide if you want to pull for Dress Aru. Though for Dress Kayoko, you can probably skip her due to her lack of use outside of Urban Bina. Anyways, that's all from me. I will be pulling for Dress Kayoko this Tuesday, so pray for me, cause yeah, I might need to whip out the old credit card. But good luck with your own pulls, and I'll see y'all in the next one.